Welcome back to the shop. So, I can't recommend this enough. Basically what I'm doing is I'm using a 120. Now this cuts like a hot knife through butter. It takes this primer right off. But it immediately, you identify any low spots that you have. Yeah, I'm hitting some high spots, but I'm hitting those high spots because of the aggressive paper. But you know what? I made a decision to sacrifice the initial primer, because what it's doing now in this case is it immediately is identifying a low spot in this area. You can see it's a little darker. And what that little bit of darkness means is that the original primer before it's cut is darker than it is when it's cut. So what happens, I immediately can see low spots. Now, high spots, you know, you can identify them real quickly. Like I said, I'm just starting to burn through, but I stopped. But I mean, that is perfect. And if I put on 2 or 3 more coats of primer, and then now come back at it with the 320 and then the 400 wet, at least I know it is now flat. But as I said, down in here, I started sanding. I started hitting a bit of steel, and then there's a spot right next to the steel that is not touched by the block, which means it's an indent, so I gotta fill it. So, again, as I said before, where I thought I was, I am not. But I would recommend this to anybody. I'm just a novice. I mean, I'm just a guy in the garage doing this for the first time. I'm not a bodywork person. But basically, I would use a couple of sacrificial coats of primer just to cut it real quick, so you get a quick indication of where your high and low spots are. And then I can fill and adjust now before I put on what I'm going to call my final high build primer, which is hopefully where then I'm just going to be flattening that out, as I said, with the 320 and the 400 wet prior to application of paint. And this is giving me an opportunity now to obviously pull the trunk lid off. I've got it out on one of my dollies, so I flattened that out. So that's ready for primer. I've got the fenders I haven't touched yet, but those are coming up. I'm going to start on my hood next, but the door and the rear quarter are done here, and I'm really happy. So again, you know, just a word of advice that your first couple of coats of primer on the car after you thought you flattened it out are going to be sacrificial. They are going to allow you to come back, knock a lot of that off. And I hate to say, but 80% of my primer is on the floor. But basically what it's doing now is it's giving me a really great surface. And from this point on, if I do this for the entire car and I identify my low spots, I'll be able to fix them. And then I come back, and then we're going to hit this thing with primer. So it's Friday. I'm hoping maybe by Tuesday, I'm going to work on the body today. I'm going to work on the body hopefully tomorrow. We got some poor weather today and tomorrow. And get this all knocked down. And then, like I said, we'll hit it with the primer. So I'm just going to continue sanding. As I said, you know, I'm using a 120, fairly aggressive, but nice and light. It doesn't have to be heavy, and remember, do your crisscross, right? You're going up and down. The body lines are a pain in the butt, especially with the body lines that disappear. So at this point here, there is no body line, and then the body line starts off here. So you got to watch you don't roll over the edge. If you do, you're going to burn through. But again, sacrificial, we're okay with that. 2 or 3 coats of primer after this should fix that all up. But like I said, that's it for today. I just wanted to give you an update. There's nothing but sanding going on here. I haven't even started thinking about putting up the paint booth yet. But I think what I'm going to try first is, once this is all knocked down and I get my 2 or 3 coats of primer back on it, I'm going to do things like painting the trunk, interior trunk, and the interior here on the rear structure, just to start to get the feel of the paint and how it lays down, and then of course the clear. And then of course we have to pull the doors, and we're going to do the inner jambs. But I'm going to also do the trick now that the fenders are off. I'm going to drill a couple of holes into the bracket here that holds the doors on, so that I can realign this door easier when I put it all together. So a couple of holes drilled into the door hinge, into the body, and that'll be for an alignment later. And then of course, once the door is off, after I've drilled those 2 holes, I can drill 2 holes from the bracket that holds it onto the door, and that'll allow me to align it later. So I can align the bracket to the door and then align the hinge to the A-pillar, and that'll probably get me 90% of the way to where I want this door back. Remember, the trouble I'm going to have is we're gonna put an integrated white stripe on this car, which means I have to have the door and fender exactly the way I want it to be done. Then I have to paint the white. Then I need to lay the stripe on, and then I gotta lay the blue on. But like I said, that's a few weeks away, but you already have to start planning for that. You have to make sure that everything goes back the way you painted it, because if not, then my stripe will never align, and then I'm gonna be screwed. So the idea is get it all done now, make sure you can realign the panels the way you want, because it has to be able to be disassembled and reassembled 2 or 3 times before this is complete. And that stripe is going to move if this door isn't exactly where it's supposed to be every single time. And the same thing with the front fender. That front fender, once that white stripe is painted, it is where it is. And I have to make sure the white stripe aligns in difference to other panel issues, right? So again, have to make sure. But another quick video, because all I'm doing is sanding, and I'm quite sure you're bored of watching that. So I'll be back in a few more days, hopefully with this car completely sanded, and hopefully with another couple of 3 coats of primer on it. Until then, thanks for joining me today. If you did enjoy this short video, hit that like button, and I'll catch up with you later.